that night that you had that moment when you actually, what was, I mean, obviously there had to be a little bit of fear, a little bit of thrill. I mean, can you take us through that a little bit? Because that's a life change. That's like I just saw God moment in a way, you know, like because you're not really sure. You know what I'm saying? And then
you're never 100% sure until you're laying eyes on one. It's just because I had like already kind of devoted my life to it at that point. But after that point, I realized this burden lifted off of me of this kind of self-doubt. Like, well, maybe they're not real. Maybe all this is nonsense, etc. So you're going to have that little nagging bit of doubt. And that's natural. Until you finally see one and then you realize, oh yeah, they're really real. Now, it doesn't mean every single report is real, every sighting is real, but there are animals out there that are causing this, and they're very smart, and they live in a lot of parts of the country. So I knew they were real at that point. But anyway, what led up to it right before that, I was out there with another guy. He actually saw, we were separated by about 60 feet away. He was in the woods. He was out of my view. This was like 2:30 a.m. like on the edge of a swamp. He heard them coming, heard chattering, then saw one come around the corner. It stopped dead, probably about 50 feet away, and squatted down and started swaying back and forth, looking right in his direction. And he was in the shadows off the road, and it was a dark night, and he was freaked out, wondering, he knew this one was looking right at him, and he couldn't figure it out. Later, I showed him that the night vision goggles that he was using was lighting up his face. It was like shining because they're like illuminated screens. And so it was like lighting up his face in a pale green. And that's what that one had keyed in on. Anyway, that one walked back out of view. Then he heard movement through the woods. And then from the other direction, that one and another one, a much bigger one, charged at him and then stopped about 15 feet away. And he got up and lit them both up with his flashlight, lit them up both well enough for him to do a good drawing of the bigger one. But he got the sense that this was like a mated pair because there was a much bigger one and a smaller one. They both seemed to be full grown. And so then he walks back over to me and says, they're right over there. What do we do? And I just said, listen, we found where they're at. We're going to come back in here and set up surveillance cameras and let them roll. And hopefully they'll come and do the same thing again. And then we've got it. So I'm explaining him the plan, and I said, where's my goggles? Where's the rest of my gear and everything? And he said, well, he dropped it over there in the woods when they charged at him.
Which is fair. I think that's fair. I think I think that's okay. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely. But I said, go back and get that stuff. If they didn't kill you already, they're not going to do it now. Just go back and get that stuff. So he starts walking back in that direction. And as he's walking back, the bigger one circles behind me through the tree line, just inside the edge growth, and then finally comes out of the edge growth, emerges about 20 feet or so, kind of behind in the opposite direction, and comes out. And I had known, not just from what was going to happen with him a moment before, but for talking to many witnesses, how when they intimidate, they'll come and be scary up to a certain distance. But it's like there's a barrier like 15, 20 feet. They don't want to get any closer than that.
It's like a mock charge, like you'll see with silverbacks.
Exactly.
Very similar.
And they don't want to get physical, but they do want to impress you and scare you. So it did that with me. And I was just like, okay, we're leaving. And and I started talking in its direction like you do with a growling dog. If you had a growling dog come up, I guarantee you start talking to that growling dog.
Hey, easy boy. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm just like, we're going. Look, I'm picking up my stuff. So because I didn't shine a flashlight on it, I didn't see the face clear enough to be able to do a good drawing, but I could certainly see if you got like a quarter moon and you got something that big standing that close to you, you can see it.
And I'm sure your eyes were dilated to the max. There was no blinking. I mean,
right.
Because this is one, you've never seen anything like this and there's no point of reference. Maybe the closest thing, but even gorillas, they're on all fours. And even though they're impressive, when you see them in a zoo, you're like, like they're big, but they're not towering over you. And they're not free, which is a completely different thing. The only thing separating you and him is opportunity. So and let me ask you, when you talked about, you heard chatter, would you support the fact that they have a language, or at least
they do.
A strong
they can use vocal language. We didn't, we didn't know what to believe about that. We had heard the Sierra Sounds recordings from the 70s, but it was only after the group doing enough expeditions and then hearing that themselves and coming back and saying, yeah, we heard this kind of, it sounds like this growly kind of vocal chatter going on between two of them and they can't understand what it is, but it certainly has the elements of sounding like a vocal language going back and forth. And of course, the ability to do language that would, our ability that distinguishes us from other primates is the fact that we walk upright. And that upright posture is what allows the voice box to develop. And then also you can carry a larger brain if you're balancing it on your shoulders as opposed to hanging over like a knuckle walker. If you're hanging over like a knuckle walker, your whole body's out of balance if your head is too big.
Right.
But if you're walking upright, it can be bigger. So you've got large brain, probably a bigger frontal cortex that controls language, and then you have this voice ability. So it evolved with them as a natural primate consequence of bipedalism. And of course, bipedalism, does so many other things. It allows you to walk through snow. One thing's it allows you if you're chasing a deer through snow and you're really tall, you can, deer isn't going to get through the snow as fast as you can, and you can catch up to it. And it allows you to see dangers from a bigger distance. There's a lot of things that help, allow you to survive better if you're a bipedal primate.
And I would imagine that given that size, with the exception of a Kodiak grizzly bear, which again, you're looking at Alaska, which again, we know there's evidence support there. Very few things that are going to challenge that smell, that sound. And that's probably what a lot of the knocking is doing. The other animals know, hey, we shouldn't be over here because the top guy is here. One of the things that I find so fascinating about this phenomenon is when you hear people give their testimonies when they meet them. And a lot of times it seems like it's a very different reaction to women and children as it is to grown men. It seems like when it's men, it's a little more aggressive. And with smaller, it's a little more curious. Do you see that? Have you experienced that?
Yeah, in so many different ways. In that, like, if they're going up repeatedly to a house or several houses in a neighborhood, you notice that neighborhood is the one where it's just women and children.
Right.
And there's no men around. And on expeditions, if there's groups of women and they can hear the voices, they're very much keyed into. And when you think about it, humans, you don't even need to understand the language. If you hear voices, you can tell the difference between a female voice and a male voice. Even if you don't understand what they're talking about, it just sounds different. So a group of females, chattering or singing, walking through the woods, these things will come much closer. So if we have enough people on an expedition, we always try to have an all-girl group to go through the woods and see if that works.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you just saw, don't stop there. You can catch the full conversations right here only on Planet Tyrus. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And you don't want to miss what's next. I'm telling you, bad things will happen. Oh, I'm just playing. Nothing bad's going to happen, but I won't be your friend.